Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. My name's Corey Whalen, managing partner of Bridgemark Strategies. We also have Jeff Nash on the podcast today, the CEO of Bridgemark Strategies, just to talk about something really important. When you take a look at the industry publications out there today and you're getting phone calls from recruiters in your office, you are hearing a ton around the record high recruiting dollars that are out there and the all-time valuations that advisors can get for their practice on the independent and the RIA channel. And currently, right now, we're seeing deals with the right business mix, the right growth metrics exceed 150 plus percent of a financial advisor's trailing 12 revenue, which is just making a lot of financial advisors ask. I know fit and the culture of the firm is really, really important. But when does it make sense to make a decision about money? So today I just wanted to have Jeff come on to talk about kind of the state of the industry and just talk about how we are seeing elite financial advisors that we're helping through this process utilize this record-setting money to really to set up their future for success, drive growth, and their overall enterprise value. So Jeff, I really appreciate you taking the time to hop on today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Corey. This is a really important topic and it's ever changing, right? And the one thing I would just want to even jump off and saying is when you talk about these 150%, that's actually to go independent, right, on a 90 plus percent payout and owning your book of business, right? We're seeing, what used to be 300% in the W-2 space, we're now seeing upwards of 500% for elite teams. And so the deals have just really exploded. And we never advocate going backwards, right? You don't want to hurt your clients to take a check, right? You don't want to go to a firm that has inferior technology, compliance, products, resources, tools that could ultimately hurt your business or hurt your clients to take a check. But when you have these deals as much as they are today, right? When does it make sense to actually just pick your head up and say, hey, look, maybe there are things aren't great at my firm. Maybe I actually can improve some of these things like technology and tools and resources, and also get compensated to then even fuel more growth for the business. So it's a great discussion.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, these aren't small, insignificant independent broker dealers offering this type of money. I mean, it's, truly the elite broker dealers in the industry that are really winning the recruiting wars right now in reinvesting into, tools and technology. So when I'm going through this process with financial advisors and they're looking at this and they're saying, hey, if I can get the same platform or better for my clients, and get this money to be able to invest in a bunch of different ways in my business to set me up better for the future and improve my client experience. Why would I not consider this?
Yeah, it's honestly you should consider it is the short answer for that. You really should. And anyone who's not considering it, I understand that your growth, you're busy, the business is complicated. There's a lot of reasons to not consider this. But to just be educated and understand what's available is really important for any individual advisor to see how they could what available for money, what available for tools and resources, what's available for them for their business, right? Treat this like a business. Right. The firms that you're with are absolutely treating you like a business, right? They understand exactly how much money they make off of you as a financial advisor and try to get that information from them. And it will be like pulling teeth. They will not provide you that information, right? They won't tell you how much money they make from you. You just have to guess, right? And by the way, they make a lot more money than what their percentage on the payout is. So understand that this is a business, it's a business transaction, and it makes sense to look at this from a real holistic perspective of, hey, what's the best place for you and for your clients?
Yeah, I mean, I'm speaking with a financial advisor right now. They made a move from an independent firm to a W-2 firm. It wound up not being the best fit for this advisor. But 5 years ago, this money did not exist. And this advisor has been thinking about making a move for a really long time. And he was thinking about, the old world of making the move independent and getting 30, 40% of your trailing 12 revenue up front. And this advisor, after having a conversation, thought he was stuck and now has the ability to break free of the note that he has inside of his organization and have plenty of money left over to be able to invest in the future of his business. But we're coming up across that more and more every single day. But Jeff, I just figured it would be really valuable for financial advisors. I think a lot of financial advisors think that when, people take a check and make a move to another firm, that money immediately goes into their bank account and it's there to, improve them and their families, well-being. But as I mentioned earlier in this podcast, there's a lot of elite financial advisors out there that are really forward thinking. They understand what their enterprise value can be down the road, 5, 6 times trailing 12 revenue. They're getting 1.5, 2 times trailing 12 revenue to make a move. And they're kind of starting to think to themselves, if I could take this 2 times revenue and invest it in my business in a bunch of different ways, and that could turn into, 5, 6 times trailing 12 revenue down the road, I really need to consider this. So do you just want to talk about, how you're having that conversation with advisors and maybe some of the ways that they've used this money to improve their business?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I want to give it some proper context as well, right? So here we are in late May 2026, and SpaceX has announced an IPO, right? And why am I bringing this up? Well, when you think about successful companies, right? Successful companies need to raise money, especially as they're kind of building out a technology or Tesla had to build out, they had to raise money to continue to fuel, right, everything that they were building. And SpaceX is doing the same thing. And it was initially private equity money, and now it's going to become public money. But all of that is allowing them to continue to maintain and run operations. What does that have to do with any of this? Well, the reality is the most successful companies that we can all think about, they use other people's money to fuel growth. And that's a big lesson in all this, right? There's two ways to use other people's money. You can borrow it and pay back a loan, or you can have investors and give up equity. And we all know that equity is more expensive to give up on a growth organization than a borrow, right? It's much better to just pay back a fixed interest rate and you keep 100% of the equity and grow the business. Well, what's available for financial advisors is actually a third option, which publicly traded or large private equity companies don't have this third option. And that third option is a forgivable loan. And a forgivable loan, for all intents and purposes, is free money. And so somebody is staking you free money to grow your business. And what we're seeing is this is not an insignificant amount of free money. And it's having a huge effect on advisors and their ability to grow their business. And yeah, there's no question at all. Some of these advisors are taking some of that money, right? And they're investing it for their own personal use. But the smartest advisors and what we're seeing is they're taking this money and they're using it to fuel growth. They're using it to add on people, acquire practices, build out a marketing program, or combinations of all three. And all of those are fueling growth in their business. And what's interesting about this industry right now is we see values on businesses ranging from as little as 5 or 6 times EBITDA to as much as 20 or 25 times EBITDA. And these businesses, as they grow, they continue to get a higher and higher multiple, right? And we've talked about multiples on EBITDA and valuations on businesses in other podcasts. We're not going to get into that in this great detail here today. But the point is, when your business is growing, your multiple on EBITDA will also grow. And so when you go from a few hundred million to a few billion, your multiple quite a bit expands. And it expands for two reasons. Number one, just pure size. A couple $1 billion firm is going to be worth that many more turns on EBITDA, right? Upwards of 12 or 14 times EBITDA versus a couple $100 million firm, which could be worth 8 or 9 times EBITDA. But in addition to that, it's the growth rate, which will then also excite buyers even more. And so a firm that's growing will also then yield even greater multiples on EBITDA. So when we think about the opportunity for advisors and using this money to invest in growth, and I know I'm getting a little long-winded, but the point of this whole thing is the smartest businesses in the world, right? And we use SpaceX as a recent example, used other people's money to fuel growth. And that's the opportunity that advisors have. And it's even more advantageous because it's not only other people's money, but it's other people's free money, as it's a forgivable loan that doesn't have to be paid back. And you can use that to really fuel a lot of growth.
Makes a ton of sense. It really, really does. And, I think a lot of financial advisors, in order to, invest in your business in some of the different ways that we talked about, sometimes when it's your own money, it's really, really hard to, be able to invest in the staff in your office or invest $100,000 to, bring on, a marketing consultant or pay the money to bring on a chief growth officer. And we'll talk about all these things further in the podcast. But like you said, Jeff, using someone else's money to be able to do these things, you're going to be much more comfortable investing that into the long-term growth of your firm. So I love the message for sure.
And I would add to that is switching firms, right, is incredibly satisfying. So yes, there's a lot of work that's associated with it, but candidly, the work is a lot less than it used to be with DocuSign, right? Everybody's moved accounts now with e-signature. And when you pick up a new account, you send out a package to a client with e-signature. And it's gotten a lot easier to switch firms because of e-signature and clients and staff comfortable with this process. But more to the point is, it is enlightening switching firms, right? It allows you to refocus and segment your client base. It allows you to refocus on your firm, right? And getting everybody rowing and kind of marching in the same direction. And what happens from there is you then are able to then start putting together a plan, put a strategy together, make it a part of your recruiting process. When we work with financial advisors, we talk to them about what their goals are, short and long term. It's really important to helping them find the right firm to understand both the short-term goals, and the long-term goals, right? Most advisors tend to think about the most immediate needs they have, and we try to help get to think about solving those immediate needs, but also trying to think through what are the longer-term needs to really consider the right partner. And so part of this is putting together a plan, a strategy as to how you're going to grow, right? Understand what is it that drives valuation? What is it that drives enterprise value, right? How are you able to maximize that? And by the way, you don't have to solely focus on driving enterprise value for your business. This stems from a place of helping clients, helping your team, doing the right thing for clients, and even if you never sell your business, you've got family in the business, you've got a next gen, and you want to transfer the business to the next gen, it's in everybody's combined interest to look at how you can maximize value. It's in the next gen's interest to how to maximize value, right? The reason value gets maximized is because businesses are more sustainable. Businesses have better value when they're more sustainable. And again, it's in everyone's interest. So just understanding that dynamic and then understanding how a firm can help you with that, right? And understanding how to use the economics and putting an actual strategy in place of saying, hey, I can use this money over the next 1 and 2 and 3 years, and this is what we're going to invest, and this is how our growth is going to be, is going to yield enormous results.
Hey, breaking in real quick. I really hope you're enjoying this episode and finding my YouTube channel of value. If you're a high-performing financial advisor that can use somebody as a guide or a resource to explore all your transition options out there in the marketplace, I'm a non-biased, independent transition consultant that can help make this process so much easier for you. And another plus, it costs absolutely nothing to work with me. If you want to have a conversation, please feel free to text, call, email, DM me. My contact information is all over this episode, and I'll let you get back to it. Let's talk about some real life cases in terms of like advisors that, me and you have worked with or others on the team that, this upfront money has done more than just kind of propel their personal situation. I mean, I'll go first with like a very recent one. I was working with a $3 million trailing 12 revenue father-son team on the independent side. The father wanted to retire in the next 4 or 5 years. He had a son that was extremely capable to be able to, take over the business. But with practice valuations being so high and this advisor's business being worth, $8-9 million minimum, the son felt really, really uncomfortable putting that much money on his balance sheet to finance the practice. So there's a lot of people that are in this situation right now. And he started to take a look at selling to a larger strategic acquirer, but the father and son both felt really comfortable that after the transaction, the son would no longer have a business to own down the road. And that was something that neither of them were comfortable with. So instead of selling, this $3 million trailing 12 revenue team got a check for close to $5 million to transition to another firm that they felt was equal of a platform. And that partially financed the purchase of the practice of the father to pass it on to the son. And then the son had much less financing on his balance sheet in order to buy the practice. And the son wound up with a practice that he's 100% own for the rest of his life. So that's one way that I've seen this money, just really change and really solve for some significant problems where it hasn't been able to in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I have a real similar scenario, right? It's not a father son. It's a $2 million independent practice that I was recently working with, but it was close to 400 million in assets, just under that, and great business, really low ROA. It was almost entirely fee based, and literally the average client's fee was like 0.55. And the advisor has, 10 plus year, 10 to 15 year cycle left before he's ready to really retire. Has a junior in there, but really not a great plan, not a great what would be enterprise value for the business. And realizes that a lot of the clients are also a lot older, but they're working with a lot of younger family members to those clients. And is literally got an offer that was upwards of two times, close to two times revenue on their move. And they now have a multi-year strategy. It's literally a 3 to 5 year strategy where they're bringing in younger clients, they're repricing their entire book of business, and also bringing in another junior advisor that they're going to have training. And the junior advisor that they're bringing in may also be one of their kids that's just recently kind of started in the workforce. So they're going to have a G2 and even a G3 and much higher fee. And so what they expect over the next 5 years is, look, just normal growth. That 400 million in assets may grow to 500, maybe even more. They have more success and they even get to 600 million in assets in the next 5 years. But their fee on that 600 million in assets is going to be more four and a half, even 5 million, what they look at a blended fee on that business. And so now you've got a business that today's day at 2 million in revenue might be worth 8, 9, 10 million max. And in 5 years' time, when they change their whole business structure, right, they could be at 25 million, even 30 million in valuation. So they literally could be tripling the value of their business over the next 5 years and using the money to really provide a lot of financing to bring in another generation, to bring in another person they can train, to go out and get some younger clients, and it's really going to fuel a lot of that. So it's just a huge opportunity for them as they think through the challenges that are available. A big part of that decision was when they went from indie to indie, they were set in their ways. They'd been at the independent broker-dealer for 20 years, and they were set in their ways. And so they had to spend a ton of time making sure they didn't go backwards. So they looked at the technology, the tools, the products, the resources, right? They actually plugged into what we describe as an OSJ, and we've talked about OSJ structures. And in the conversations I've had with them since, they are incredibly grateful for the OSJ. They've been able to break down walls inside the firm, really almost, providing phenomenal service. Not that the firm might have had bad service otherwise, but the service has been an incredible experience.
And then, another thing I've seen quite a bit, and you talked about it a little bit earlier in the podcast, Jeff, but just hiring necessary staff. I've worked with a couple teams that they see the opportunity for growth, they see the opportunity in enterprise value, and they've used the money to bring on a really high quality chief growth officer onto their organization. And, this isn't a part-time person. It is a full-time person that is fully focused on going out there, building COI relationships for the firm, referral sources, and also uncovering recruiting opportunities and practice acquisition opportunities. So, instead of working with a fractional recruiter, they're working with someone full time that is 100% focused on growing their organization. Or also as well, just hiring additional staff. A licensed admin is a lot of money. After all of the taxes and the salaries and all of those different things, you're looking north of $100,000. Getting this additional money to be able to invest in whether it is a staff person or a paraplanner or a chief marketing officer, whatever it is, having this extra money as, ammo to be able to do the things that you've wanted to do for a really long time, there's no way that's not going to positively impact your growth and multiply the efforts of that investment over the long term.
I just talked to a firm yesterday, and it's just again another example to kind of get people to thinking of what's possible with all of this. The firm was a $900 million firm. They have four partners, right? They've had a lot of success, and they really want to get into the acquisition game. And they were talking to us almost just from a consulting, just picking our brains on stuff. And they're not really ready to make a move, which is fine. And we were talking to them just about opportunities, and they haven't done any acquisitions in the past. And when you got to think about in life, we all get comfortable with our ways, right? We get comfortable with our income, et cetera. And so what we had talked about is, look, if you want to start acquiring practices, first of all, you have to be prepared to compete with the big players, number one. And so we had a lengthy conversation about that. Number two is you got to be prepared to actually lose on a deal, do a bad deal or two, because the reality is any particular seller is going to ask the buyer, hey, how many deals have you done? And that's going to be a screening criteria. And so what we literally counseled them on was to buy a couple of firms, even if they lose money on a couple of firms, right? It's going to help them get over the hurdle so they can learn from those mistakes, buy bigger, right? To be able to be more competitive and buy bigger deals. The moral to the story, the summation to the story is, does anybody really want to buy a practice and lose money? Right? You don't want to overpay. And so when you're using other people's money, right, this is the summation, is it makes things a lot easier to actually lose some money on a practice, right? So you don't have to worry about, hey, we're going to walk away from this. When you got four different partners, all you need is one to say, hey, I don't want to do this one. It's not going to be a good deal. And you're never going to get over that hump and get your first transaction. And so when you start using other people's money, it just becomes that much easier to be that much more aggressive. And now you start buying one practice and two practices. And next thing you know, you've bought five, and now you've bought 10, and you become a serial acquirer. And now you can compete with the large PE-backed RIAs.
So one other thing that I wanted to talk about, Jeff, a lot of this conversation has been more of like an independent to independent move. Financial advisors that already own their business, own their data, have a extremely easy transition from one firm to another, easier every day. Let's talk about the wirehouses for a second, and for that wirehouse advisor making that initial leap to independence. How can this upfront money help financial advisors in the wirehouse accomplish their goals?
So, I mean, I've been in this industry now for a long time, right? I've been doing this for 27 years, in the industry for 33 years. And what we've seen now for wirehouse advisors is effectively there's two things that they can do, right? And the one thing that they actually, a lot of them tend to do, which is the worst possible thing they could do. The one thing they tend to do is when they have a team and there's a couple of older advisors on the team, they do their sunset program, right? Whether it's Alpha or CTP, right? Whatever it is, they're doing the in-house succession, and they are literally selling their business for pennies on the dollar. The comparison would be take your house, cut the price down by 50% of whatever the actual value of your house, and see who wants to buy it. And of course, you're going to have people lined up at the door to buy it because it's 50% of the value, and somebody else is going to capture that value. And that's what happens a lot. And it's unfortunate because they're just giving away and losing money. Moving from wirehouses, there's two directions that really become prevalent. One is you can go W-2 to W-2. And we're actually seeing wire-to-wire deals, very aggressive, effectively becoming that sunset program with the second gen, are allowing to kind of maintain the first gen and taking over the note where the first gen can then get paid off. We also see W-2 to W-2 with wire to the PE firms, and also offering aggressive deals. And they're actually doing those on capital gains. And so there's a huge, could be pricing differential, but B, tax advantage that could be really significant for those retiring advisors. And for the younger advisors that are staying behind, they often can get equity in that growing RIA, and that itself could be worth significantly more. So we see the wirehouses with some new choices. The third choice is not a new choice, but it's certainly becoming a much more prevalent choice, and that's the wire to Indy. And what we've seen in the wire to Indy is the deals that we've seen on the Indy side is absolutely financing and de-risking the business. So as we talk about 1.5 and upwards of even 2 times revenue, right? That is equal to upwards of 3 or 4 times income. So simple math. If you're getting a deal 2 times revenue on an Indy to Indy type of a move, and your payout is 50%, then you're actually getting upwards of 4 years worth of income to go to an independent platform to launch your business. We think about business startup costs in this industry as being incredibly low. All you really need is a computer. Now, we know no one really, especially coming out of a wirehouse, is not going to just work out of a computer, generally speaking, right? They're looking for office, they're going to have some support, right? So there's going to be more to it from a startup cost perspective. But when you have 4 years worth of take home income guaranteed to you to make the move, that allows for a huge opportunity in your financing of your growth. And now you can make the move and you're generating true enterprise value beyond your wildest dreams. We're seeing enterprise value that is blowing away people's expectations. We did a deal recently where the advisor got 3 times the amount they were expecting. They put a floor when they started working with us. Hey, I want to get X amount. The final price was 3 times larger. So the numbers are just off the charts of enterprise value, and it starts with capturing it and how to capture it, right? Do the right things to capture it, and then it comes back to you in spades.
I love it, Jeff. It's a great insight. I just think it's really important for financial advisors that are out there and are potentially thinking about this. We've helped thousands of financial advisors do this. We have helped financial advisors in your exact same scenario. We've helped them think through the pros and the cons of these different things, and we have, the stories 3 years after in terms of what they have, accomplished as well. So if anyone has any doubt whatsoever that their firm is not their lifetime partner, just pick up the phone. We are more than happy to help give a broad stroke view of the industry, what other financial advisors like yourself, are doing, and just give you real case scenarios and help you think through the long term to make sure that you are, thinking through this the right way and accomplishing your goals in the best way possible. So if anyone has any questions on this at all or any other real life scenarios, please take a look at our website. We have tons of videos, podcasts, case studies of financial advisors just like yourselves, and white
White
papers
papers.
that come
Yeah.
out on a regular basis just to keep you smarter on the industry and just make sure that you're up to date and just get a better feeling of what it's like to work with us on a regular basis. I really hope this helps, and we really hope we can have a conversation soon. I hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks all.